It started out as a small speck in my right eye. I thought it was a malicious stray mote of dust. My wife found the way I twitched my eye in an effort to dislodge it funny at first. She quickly grew disconcerted instead. Upon inspection, she found nothing in my right eye. "It's a perfectly fine eye, hon. Don't worry about it," she placated. Gracie was the steady one between us, relatively at least. We were a rather turbulent affair, but if I broke dishes at my worst, she'd do no more than slam doors. She was the one who always made peace first after all the brooding on both sides. It's a bit of an insecurity on my part that she was more emotionally mature in that way, and I won't deny that a bit of that feeling flared up when she dismissed my eye so matter-of-factly. I was a little frustrated at her nonchalance, but knew better than to drag it out. I stopped the twitching for her to snuggle up against me while we watched Swan Lake for the 5th time. It was a narrow battle for favorite between that and Silver Linings Playbook, with the former winning out for having one more lesbian sex scene than the latter. Later on, though, the irritation was still there. It was the same way an eye felt cutting up onions, a light compression from the lower eyelid. As any man who's been in a kitchen with cut onions would do, I went to try to wash my eyeballs. It's such an unpleasant feeling running water like paper cuts across the iris, fighting against my body to keep my eyelids open to let water rake through the soft white flesh. It just wouldn't come off. Gracie had fallen asleep halfway through the movie, so while she was sound asleep, I rooted through our medicine cabinet for an eye drop. It may sound a bit stupid of me, but at that point, I had been agitated by that pinprick speck a couple hours by then, nor am I a very steady man. My hands would shake ever so lightly whenever not rested against a surface. Thus, in the middle of the night, as I tried to wash my eye out with the dropper, I'd let it fall ever so slightly too far. The sturdy plastic material met my pupil and bent the latter. Not in the way your eye pushes down when pressed, but in the same manner paper swells on the opposite side of a blunt scissor blade. All that pent-up discomfort translated to anger and multiple protracted long growls. My right eye, a swirl of red around a sick hazel circle, had something wrong with it. There was a leak, as though the ring around my iris had perforated and started oozing out brown and green. I closed my eye immediately to press the base of my palm against it in an effort to stem the flow. There was something wrong with me. Panic-filled and breathing hard, I went back to what Gracie told me. I took a deep breath. I counted to 10. I made a list of things I could see, smell, and feel. I had to take stock of what was happening. It was late at night. I could have been tired and seeing things. I've been irritated for the past hour. My mind could be playing tricks on me. The eye was back to normal, except for the bloodshot replacing whites. The irritation was still there, but I was fine enough to go to bed. In the morning, I had Gracie check my eye again. "It's perfectly fine, hun. It's all in your head." Yes, that's where eyes tend to be. She laughed a little before telling me to let her go back to sleep, even though the sun was out. When I checked my eye again, though, it was mostly fine. The right eye was pinkish around the very edges, but maybe that was normal. The speck hadn't bothered me enough to wake me up in the night, but it was definitely still there. On the train ride to work, people stared at me while I tried to rub it out. By the time I had got to work, the pain was more prominent. Instead of a mote of dust, it was a grain of sand firmly lodged between pink eyelid flesh and squishy eye jelly. Felt like it was slowly trying to push its way into my eyeball. As I kept rubbing and twitching, my coworkers started growing a bit concerned. They were too polite to say anything, but they stared at me with this look in their eyes, like there was something wrong with me. I went to the bathroom to see, and reflected was my normal left eye, and a hideous right. Warts had grown on the bottom eyelid, protruding grotesquely outward, one atop the other, mounds of pus stacked on the other. White fluid was leaking quietly from the side of the base wart, an overlarge dome, a centimeter across. The whites of my eyes were replaced with crimsons and ochres, blue-red the closest thing to the original pure white, mixed with streams of neon green and churning brown. All those people seeing me, watching, staring, they knew there was something wrong with me. Horrified at myself, I turned to the person next to me, an everyman with a crisp light blue shirt and red tie, a calm face with a nice head of hair, somebody that everyone liked, somebody with nothing wrong with them. "There's something wrong with my eye," I half rasped and croaked. He looked at me the same way all those people passing by on the train at the office looked at me, like there was something wrong with me. "It's a perfectly fine eye." They were lying to me. They wanted to be polite. They didn't want to point and jeer at the freak. I started to hyperventilate. The walls started to crumble while a depression in the floor started to form. I heard him trying to tell me something, but he was on the other end of a phone booth. I needed to calm down. I took out my wallet and found my wife's picture. She was never shy of her red hair, even though it stood out. I remember her telling me that she'd dye it red if she ever got old enough for her hair to turn gray. She had those big round glasses that she's worn ever since she was a teenager. Her eyes were Hubble telescopes, bigger than any one person could ever handle, but she did it with grace. Her lips were, well, I don't feel comfortable telling strangers online about that. I just needed to go back to her. We'd solve this together. By the time I had my breathing in check, my manager had come in the toilet, no doubt alerted by red tie. Bobby was a sweet old man. I think his real name was Robert, but everyone calls him Bobby because it fits him better. He didn't just remember your birthdays, but your wife and kids too. We'd make jokes about him with his clockwork anniversary and birthday gifts. How if one of us ever forgot a wife or husband's birthday, we could just replace Bobby's name with our own on the gift tag. He was looking at me now with those teary eyes. Granted, he always looked as though he's about to cry. He just had one of those eyes. "Hey, buddy, you don't look so good," he said with a soft smile. "I've got both my eyes, don't I?" Gracie and I went to the optometrist together after work. Hospitals are far too clean. I get that that's the point. If John and Jill get a bad case of herpes after a regrettable one-night stand, I'd much prefer knowing the seats they waited in were scrubbed clean. Still, there's this perfection. It's too clean, too perfect. Gracie laughed when she got home to my wearing a Skull and Bones eye patch. When she realized I was serious, she asked to see. "I think you look perfectly fine," she said as she gave me a little kiss. It didn't feel like she was lying then. The discomfort turned into pain. The grain of sand sharpened to a fine razor. No longer content to push its way in, it was pressing in. I couldn't ignore it anymore. It demanded all my attention, until I saw the eye itself, of course. On the train ride home, I avoided every mirror, window, or any reflective surface. I was hideous. I never hated myself so much. I was glad for the eye patch to hide behind, though. Thankfully, we had kept it after last year's Halloween. I think the only other thing keeping me sane was Gracie softly humming to herself. We got a younger doctor. I was slightly worried that she hadn't finished her schooling yet. She had a wolf cut so that her hair reached a little past her shoulders in wavy brown curls. "How are you feeling today, sir?" she said so unabashedly that it dispelled any doubts I had about her qualifications. "He's not doing so hot, Doc," Gracie answered for me. "Well, it says here you've been feeling some pain in your right eye. Why don't you let me take a look?" At that point, I could feel the dampness of the eye patch, likely from the weeping sores that festered around the eye at that point. There was an audible welch as I peeled the fabric off. A wart had formed on my top eyelid and leaked pus lecherously, preventing me from opening my eye for too long. The pain was a searing hot needle now. I had started mindfully breathing in and out to contain myself. "It looks perfectly fine to me." "I'm sorry?" I was shocked. I had pus leaking out from my eye. She was joking, right? "Of course, we can do some tests, but it looks as fine as your left eye from a glance." "What are you talking about?" "Usually there'd be some external sign of something wrong, like redness or—" "There's something wrong with me." "Hun, calm down. They can do some tests." Now, sir, please calm down and back away from my table. We'll do some tests and... No! Can't you see? There's something wrong with me. Hun, let's take a step back. You're making her uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? It feels like my eye is melting. Hun, you're perfectly fine. Calm down, Gracie lied. She had this look, the same look they all had. She was thinking the same thing they all did. There was something wrong with me. I was so deep in pain and anger. I wanted to break the doctor's face into her table. I wanted to hurt Gracie. I never want to hurt Gracie. The shame I felt was overpowering. I forgot about the pain and the anger. All I thought about was how I wanted to hurt Gracie, even for a split second. I ran out, dripping tears and yellow pus on those perfect white floors. I charged through a bathroom door and kicked a stall open. The pain was back and it was agonizing, as though my flesh itself was conspiring against me in disgust because there was something wrong with me. I knew what I had to do then. It wasn't even that painful, comparatively. All I felt was relief, as that searing pain went away as I neatly clawed my right eye out. The hardest part was getting through the eyelids. The warts and sores burst out in a mix of red blood with yellow pus, while skin slowly gave way, parting, breaking, tearing off until keratin met eye. The eyeball itself was this mushy ball of flesh. It wasn't white at that point. None of it was. The iris had completely dissolved, and looking back at me was this mix of brown and red. Now that it wasn't a part of me, it almost looked mesmerizing. An earthly tone with just enough personality and rivers of red. The optic nerve was the easiest bit, though. There was this satisfying feeling as the cord broke, releasing me from that infernal pain. When the hospital guards found me, the stall was covered in blood. The doctors told me Gracie had to give me a blood transfusion so I wouldn't die of blood loss. They did their best to try to fit my eye back in, but my body seemed hostile to it. Since it had been so badly damaged in extrication, they figured it was a lost cause anyway. They won't tell me when I can leave. They said they have to keep me under observation for a while. It's weird, looking out with only one eye now. It's relieving, though. That thing's gone from my right eye socket. They did a clean job reconstructing my right eyelid. The doctors had to glue it shut and fill my eye socket with some sort of plastic surgery filler so it would keep its shape. In the mirror, I look perfectly fine now. I look more than fine now. There's nothing wrong with me anymore. All that's left is for all those others to see. They haven't let me see Gracie yet. She'd love me even more now that I'm like this. They all would. We've been calling, though. She's all right, but she keeps telling me she wants me to get better soon, that she's waiting for me and she's there for me. I keep trying to tell her I already am better. There's a nice guard in my hospital room, though. He looks exactly like a police officer would, right down to the cap. He doesn't have that look that all those other people did looking at me. None of the orderlies coming in to give me food do. I don't have that eye anymore. It's been about 5 days with my contact with Gracie being only through phone calls. I really wish I could see her. I need to ask her something. That guard's been looking at me funny now. I feel like there's a speck in my left eye.